to take a little time to talk to you guys about the character sheet and what all of this stuff means. So let's get started. So this is your character sheet. Obviously, your character name goes right there. Player name goes right there. And instead of levels, we have ranks. So the what it would be called in D&D, if you're switching over from a D&D D20 system, would be your level. So I'm just going to put level there. Excuse my handwriting. It's not great. So it's 1 through 10. And then after 10th level adept, that's what we call it. When you're rank 1 through 10, you become a master, and then it starts the 1 through 10 again. So if you were like level 11 in D&D, you, in our system, you would be rank 1 master. So starting over here, we have birthrights. These are like our character races. They're not quite the same. And in a later video, I can talk a little bit more about that. But if we had to call it something in like a D&D system, we would call it your race. And then your branch is your subrace. So your guild, this is, we have a little bit different system. We use guilds instead of character classes. A, because it sounds more eloquent, maybe a little less classy. But so this is your characters class. So what type of character are you playing? And in later videos, and we put out some videos about character classes. So you can kind of check those out and see what those are about. So your Adept Lodge, you get that at 3rd rank. So similar to D&D, you get to kind of specialize your guild. And this is sort of like a subclass in D&D. Your Master Lodge, you get to take another kind of specialization once you reach 3rd level master or 3rd rank master. Excuse me, don't tell Mark I called it a level. Anyways, so you get an additional like subclass. Now, the interesting thing about our game is that you can take a different lodge than what is in your guild if you want to. And that's our way of multi-classing in our system. So you are not limited to taking a lodge that is in with your guild. Each guild has 3 adept lodges and 2 master lodges. So your estate in D&D, this is actually more like your background. And then within backgrounds, you have 3 options to take. So it's your sub background. And age is pretty self-explanatory. Chronicle is just kind of what kind of adventure or the campaign that you're in. And your Fury, that's your adventuring group. So I'm just going to abbreviate this. So that is the top. Then we have our different stats, our abilities. So strength is the same as it is in D&D. So in order to find out your strength score, if you were creating a character in our system, you would roll 3d6, and you can either drop the lowest and then re-roll it. You can re-roll it up to twice. And we also have what's called a pity rule. So if you roll a lot of 1s and 2s, they just allow you to either take the standard stat block array, which is similar to in D&D, or you can re-roll the 1s and 2s until you get something besides the 1 and 2. So these are just, so the score goes here. And so instead of having like a little spot for the modifiers on the sheet, we have dots, right? So say your strength is 13. You'd have 1 dot, and that's your modifier. And so it'd be the same with each of those. The new skill or the new ability we have is Uncanny. And Uncanny is like the arcana of the world. So let's talk about our passions. So we have passions. We don't have alignments. We have passions. And so what you do is you assign your numbers at the beginning according to the character creation guide. And you should have 3 that are one of the top ones. So what are your values? Or we call them virtues. What's important to you? So like, is your character loving? Is that their value, is their dignity really important to them? Is loyalty important to them? You know, staying loyal to the people around them, the people that they care about. Is duty, doing what you were supposed to do, important? Is being kind and courteous important? Is courage important, or is honor important? And then you'll have 3 of these vials, which are sort of like flaws, right? And the nice thing is every time you rank, you can either move one of your virtues up. So I'm going to just write virtue here. So virtues. And these are vials. So vials. And so you can change one of your virtues or vials. It can either go up or down by 1 each time you rank. The interesting thing is, I've said you need 3 of the virtues and 3 of the vials. There are 7 here, right? Right? My math is correct in this. So whichever one you choose is going to be your character's core conflict. So it is their internal struggle. Are you love or heartless? Maybe you've been very loving in the past, but you've been burned too many times. So maybe your instinct is to love, but you have a lot of reservations about it because you've been hurt a lot in the past. Maybe you want to try to do what you're supposed to do, but you're a little bit reckless too. And so maybe you weave back and forth between duty and reckless. So whichever one you choose as your character conflict is going to be your crux pair. All right. So now we get onto skills. So in our system, rather than having a proficiency bonus, we do not have proficiency bonuses, which is going to allow you to have a little bit easier time specializing your character and making it unique. So your brawl is like your unarmed attacks and your grappling. Finesse would be like using a finesse weapon like a rapier. Firearms, guns, they that's anything like guns, bombs. We don't have like sophisticated guns in our system because it's set in a medieval type fantasy world. But they do have flintlocks and then muskets. And we also have bombs and explosives. So that would be your firearm skill. Bow is just using a bow, crossbow, longbow, short bow, you name it, it's the bow skill. One hand would be your one-handed weapons. Two hand is going to be like your great axes and your heavy weapons that require 2 hands. There, we do have weapons that you could use either or for, like a long sword, similar to D&D, but those are the skills. In Mayhem, which is our fighting group of skills. Physical is like your physical abilities. So acrobatics, same as in D&D. Athletics, same as in D&D. Intimidation, we put it here because we all know that somebody who's big and brawny can be can be intimidating, but your GM, or what we call a tail spinner, might decide that your intimidate can be mixed with your charisma or whatever. So stealth, same as in D&D, sleight is sleight of hand, and survival. How well are you able to survive? Then we've got animal ken. Animal ken is basically animal handling. We have a skill that does not have an analog in D&D, and that's craft. And so how well are you able to craft things, whether that's like sewing projects, improvised weapons, explosives, tonics and elixirs, alchemical things. Craft is your skill. Insight, same as in D&D, you know, how well are you able to read people and situations? Investigate is just the same as investigation in D&D. Lore might be similar to history. It's just how much do you know about the stories on certain subjects. Medicine is same as in D&D. Now we have this skill called command, which is a little different than intimidate. Command is your ability to tell people what to do in a crisis situation. So how well are you able to bark orders at people, and do they listen? Deception, same as in D&D. Perform is just performance from D&D. Feast is an interesting skill. So in Lothlorn, the feast is very, very important. And so the feast is your ability to kind of carouse, to drink and eat and be merry with a party, and kind of how charming are you at this, and how well are you able to keep the crowd entertained and interact with them. Persuasion, same as in D&D. Streetwise, so you know, I feel like streetwise is a little different than survival. This is kind of like your survival. How well can you survive and get along in urban settings? How well do you know the streets? Do you have street smarts? That's what I would call streetwise, street smarts. Alertness is like your perception. Ortho. So ortho is an interesting skill. We have there are little things that you could find, like shells and acorns and things in nature that have some arcane properties. And your ortho skill is your ability to kind of find those things, use those things, and also your dots in ortho kind of determine how much ortho you can take. So if you wanted to do something cool, like an arcane ability or something, you could take some ortho and ask your tail spinner if you could do the thing. And then if you take more ortho in a scene, which is like, a scene is just like if there was a combat that round, that would count as a scene. Or if you're traveling, you know, it would be time between short rests. But it's your ability. So if you take more ortho, say I had like 2 dots in ortho, you know, and I took 3 ortho, you would have to roll to see if you get blight. Blight is a decaying of one's soul, or we call it a mote, or mind or body. So it's not just decaying of your body, it's not just decaying of your mind, it's decaying of who you are as an individual. Tro. So Tro, we have some fun things coming up where we're going to have our version of like a Fey realm, but it's going to be a lot more integral in our world. And so the Tro, kind of like the fairy realm, your knowledge about that and ability to find places where the I guess barriers between that realm are thin, and places where you can travel into there called Tro gates. Nature is just how well do you know nature, similar to in D&D. Vilecraft is like your arcana and your knowledge of like monsters and the uncanny and the things that go bump in the night. Dwemer. So we don't have traditional magic. The world has 7 Dwemers, and there's like a magical or arcane weave that is produced by the world. And if you are able to influence the Dwemer, you are able to kind of, in some cool ways, impact reality, So let's move down here.